So I hope you guys had a happy Thanksgiving or a good week and stayed clear of the Black Friday zombies. I just want to talk for a while. I always say for just a minute, but it's never just a minute, about this whole fake news thing. Most people still don't know that Google has a parent company now named Alphabet. And a lot of people wonder why Alphabet, why that is. And the Washington Post tried to say it was because of profits. But the truth is, Google is in control of vast swaths of information and communication on the web. We've already seen Google censoring search results about the election in ways that favor their political stance, and why not? WikiLeaks proved that Alphabet CEO and Bilderberg attendee Eric Schmidt was meeting with the Clinton camp prior to the election, and Podesta referred to him as, quote, head outside advisor, adding that Schmidt was, quote, ready to fund, advise, and recruit talent for the Clinton campaign. Knowing all of that, it's blatantly clear that there's no way Google/Alphabet is impartial or unbiased, but it's embedded all over the internet, and people use the search engine thinking this is just a non-partial search engine and nothing more. No, Schmidt has already admitted that Google has become so powerful at this point, it can guess more or less what people are thinking.
One of the things that eventually happens in that perceived line of reasoning is we don't need you to type at all, because we know where you are, with your permission. We know where you've been, with your permission. We can more or less guess what you're thinking about.
You think that kind of information can't be used to shape public opinion and shape world events? That's a lot of power that Google has. And Alphabet/Google owns YouTube, which makes so much sense if you consider how considerable the effort has been on YouTube as of late to censor alternative news topics. With all that in mind, I wanted to discuss this fake news Psyop that's happening right now. This is one of your classic Hegelian problem reaction solution Psyops, but it's so sloppy that they must not think anyone is paying attention at all. Or maybe at this point, so much BS has been passed off as real and legitimate that society's concept of reality is so permanently warped that the people running the show can just blatantly lie and just pass it off as true and not even care how obvious the lie is. Because if anything, over the last year, for sure at least the last year, we've seen some of the most blatant lies being reported as truths. And they don't even care. It's like they don't even care how obvious the bullshit is. And we've seen in recent weeks all over the mainstream media cries to censor the so-called fake news.
In the past 24 hours, many on the left have stepped up demands that companies like Facebook, Google, and Twitter, the companies through which almost all of your news flows, censor so-called fake news.
That the scales were tipped unfairly through fake news.
The divide is real and it is distressing. And it's partly because of Facebook.
It's literally called a news feed.
And particularly in an age of social media where so many people are getting their information in sound bites and snippets off their phones. If we can't discriminate between serious arguments and propaganda, then we have problems.
That's right, the politician-in-chief lecturing us about propaganda.
And at first, people weren't even sure what exactly constituted fake news. But then, like clockwork, the mainstream media starts passing around this list created by some liberal community college communications professor, which includes a whole lot of the alternative media. And if you read the list and you read what she's written, the whole thing is completely ridiculous. If you look at this list, what you'll notice right away is there are absolutely no mainstream media outlets on here, even though a large portion of them got caught colluding with the Clinton campaign through WikiLeaks, and I'll touch on that in a little bit. But her notes are also it's very hilarious. Well, there's a couple things here, because it's not just fake news sites. She's got it broken down as fake, misleading, clickbaity, and or satirical news. And she breaks this out, and she even says something like The Onion should be on here because it has the potential to perpetuate misinformation based on different audience misinterpretations, and to make sure anyone who reads a story by The Onion, for example, understands its purpose. I don't think it's her job or the government's job or a corporation's job to make sure that everybody who reads something understands the purpose of that story in exactly the same way. It's as if she wants, and they want, this homogenous pool of mindless, like a hive mind, that we're all just going to come to information and we're all going to interpret it exactly the same way. And that makes no sense. That's never going to happen. Unless they put SpongeBob bucket helmets on everyone. It doesn't even matter what's written. We're all going to see things differently. We're not all always going to have the same opinion of how something is. And it's not the government's job to make sure that we do anyway. So that's very Orwellian in my opinion to begin with. But then she adds a note about the sources that she trusts for her news. And she includes government-funded NPR, Bilderberg-Attendee The Washington Post, Council on Foreign Relations partner The Atlantic, and the blatantly biased New York Times, which totally got outed in WikiLeaks as colluding with the Clinton campaign. So these are all biased sources. So how she even thinks she's in a position at all to be putting together such a list when clearly she's very biased. And what's scarier is she says this list is for educational purposes, which means she uses it in her community college classroom. That's scary. So that's what she's teaching kids, is unbiased news. It'd be one thing if this list was just getting passed around as some list that a liberal college professor came up with, but it's not. They actually went ahead and started publishing this in different mainstream outlets. Like the LA Times was passing this list off about, want to get fake news out of your news feed? Block these sites, you know.
Only reading from Facebook, maybe pay for a subscription to a newspaper in your area or watch the nightly news. I think the best thing people can do is just seek out a variety of sources from a variety of opinions, orientations, or traditional news sources.
As if this is a real list and not just some list this random lady came up with. This whole thing is very coordinated. They've been laying the groundwork on it for a while. Back in August, I don't know if you guys remember, Facebook fired its human editors because it came out that they were preloading their top news, trending news section with stories, and then it came out that they were making Black Lives Matter trend even though it really wasn't. So they were pushing certain stories and then also censoring certain conservative stories off of that list. And when all of that criticism came out, they fired all of those people and they let the algorithm be in charge. And then immediately the algorithm began posting fake news. And by fake in this particular instance, I mean completely made up altogether, not just alternative viewpoints from whatever the establishment agenda is. Fast forward to the week of the election, when all of a sudden you had Facebook get accused of spreading false information that influenced the election, at the same time that WAPO came out with a story about how Google's top news link for final election results was going to a fake news site with false numbers. And this happened all at the same time. So there's your Hegelian Psyop right there. Oh no, what can we do? We have this fake news problem. We must do something. It looks totally set up. I mean, come on, you think Google's smart enough to know what people are thinking, but dumb enough to link their election results to a fake site with fake numbers? I don't think so, okay? And right after that, right on cue, there's this huge outcry from liberal establishment media regarding so-called fake news. And then both Google and Facebook are declaring they have to crack down on the people who misrepresent the news. And what a bait and switch. I mean, we can all agree there's a little word game, a little semantics argument that's going on here. Because there's fake, and then there's misrepresented. Fake is a forgery. That's counterfeit. Misrepresented, however, means misleading, but it's open to way more interpretation than fake. Misrepresentation is in the eye of the beholder. Misrepresentation could just mean it's not being represented in the way that Google or the establishment wants it to be. But now they're just going to group that all together in one bag and change what words mean. Again, Google changing its name to Alphabet. They're just going to control what things mean now. So Google's going to crack down on so-called fake news sites. But think about how much power and control these people have over what people see online already. Right now, the crackdown is just by taking away the ability to use AdSense to make ad revenue on their sites. But you also have Facebook and Twitter vowing to crack down on fake news sites as well. And Twitter's been suspending alt-right accounts. And even Mark Zuckerberg made the comment that Facebook has to be extremely cautious about becoming the arbiters of truth, which is like a big joke because that's exactly what Google and Facebook are doing already. And it's only getting cranked up as they are now attempting to shut down sites that they claim are misrepresenting the news. And again, it's misrepresentation according to who? The official story? Because that's not hard to do. The official story is bullshit a lot of the time. And again, as with YouTube, this isn't just about ads. Although lots of bloggers keep themselves going with ad revenue. And I can tell you that I don't know how many times in the past I've published an article on my own website, and then I've Googled the exact title of my article only to find it pop up on the sites that have republished my article. But my site doesn't show up on Google hardly at all when I search for it. It's way down the list. It's never the top search result. And even though it's the original source of that information. Meanwhile, I think a lot of people who would be watching this video can agree with me that the #1 purveyor of propaganda, both abroad and here at home, would be the US government. Especially now that propaganda has been legalized. I mean, for example, our State Department openly funds a group in Syria called the White Helmets, who make fake war propaganda to the tune of tens of millions of dollars, and then our mainstream media reports on that war propaganda back here at home as if that's real, on a loop, just brainwashing people with the government's war programming to get people to support the government's regime change operation in Syria. There's a reason they call this programming, by the way. They're programming the population's reality with this stuff. I mean, this is now the lens through which people are perceiving the world around themselves, which in turn programs how they live their life in our society. It's very sad. Just 6 corporations are putting out 90+% of the media that everyone consumes. And if you don't get your news from television, then you're getting it from the internet, usually through Facebook and Google, and going directly to, some of these mainstream sites or news aggregator sites. This is a virtual matrix because you can't be at all these places at one time. So everyone is relying on search results or what their television tells them to give them the information they need about the world around them, about what's going on in the world around them. And so if they're programming everyone that the world is a horrifying place filled with terror around every corner, that's what people are going to think. Or like during the election, you'll notice that there were no mass shootings or shooting events anywhere. And there was nothing. It was just the election. We were in an election news bubble. It was as if that was the only thing going on in the whole entire world. And that's how much control these websites and the major media companies have over our reality if we are consuming all of our information about the world through only those sources. They're programming reality for millions of people now. And I don't know if you saw, but on the Ron Paul website, they released a real fake news list of so-called journalists who now, thanks to WikiLeaks, we know were colluding with the Clinton campaign behind the scenes. These are the people that sold us the Iraq had weapons of mass destruction lie, and who told us that if we like our doctor, we can keep our doctor, and who swore up and down that Hillary had a 98% chance of winning the election after they released doctored polls in an attempt to sway votes her way. As you can see, it's pretty much all of the mainstream media sources that have been deemed the real news, derisive air quotes. But again, this is what the internet is. It's what it was always meant to be. It's what it was built to be. It's a cybernetic loop of communication and control. It's a technocratic lockdown. It was created by DARPA, after all. And now that we're all on this grid, they're going to start clamping down on ideas and information and what people talk about, and as Eric Schmidt himself has said, what people think. This has always been the plan. And it's surprising, actually, that this didn't happen sooner. All this talk of shutting down alternative media and fake news and making it so that people can only get their information from establishment sources. Again, we live in a world where just 6 companies control 90% of the media that we consume. And actually, now that AT&T, who is thoroughly in bed with NSA, it's pretty much been layered in with the NSA since World War II for sure, just got done buying Time Warner The company with the hypnotic eyeball symbol, actually, what it actually looks like is your thalamus. And depending on how you look at it, and they changed their name to Spectrum, just by the way. So you have Alphabet and Spectrum. Visible spectrum, invisible spectrum. They're just saying they control everything now, and your brain too. I mean, that's what it looks like from the symbols that they're using and the words that they're using. And the government's going to be that much more in control of what we see and hear, what information makes its way into our brains. And it just proves how powerful free thought really is, that they're trying so hard to shut it down. Right now, these guys are still playing nice. But if they can create a big enough public outcry with this fake news psyop, and psyops like it, then eventually they'll just use that as a license to censor free speech on the web altogether. I mean, they're already saying WikiLeaks is a terrorist organization. They've done reports on the Pizzagate thing and made it seem as though anyone who is researching that is an internet bully, and they're being influenced by fake news, and that's why they're doing that.
And Leslie, this may have been even more deliberate than the fake news that hit the presidential election. The pizza shop owner suspects thousands of online bullies have set out to destroy him, maybe simply because he and a friend supported the Clinton campaign.
They're just trying to sweep everything they don't want people talking about under this banner of fake news now as a way to censor and shut down pretty much anything they don't want us discussing or thinking about or talking about or sharing information about. I mean, think about this. If there was no independent alternative media, there would be hardly any reporting on the government's police state crimes that are happening at the Dakota Access Pipeline protests, which have been, the majority of which have been blacked out in the mainstream press. But it's been reported here recently that by multiple people who were there, that the police trapped hundreds of protesters on a bridge, peaceful protesters, and began firing tear gas and water cannons at them in freezing 25-degree weather. They've injured dozens of people. Aaron was telling me that some girl might lose her arm. I mean, this is about people protesting the destruction of sacred Indian land. And the government, by basically having a blackout on that, is keeping the public from even knowing what's really going on over there. And that's why the alternative media exists in the first place. Because the mainstream media doesn't tell anything remotely close to the truth or give a clear picture of what's actually going on. They give a doctored version based on whatever the establishment agenda is. It's the same thing that public school kids get when they go to public school. They get a doctored version of history and world events. And that's what the media does. They give you a doctored version of what's going on based through the lens of the establishment, how they want you to perceive your reality. But the media was always supposed to be one of the people's most important protections against government tyranny. The media we have now, however, is completely in bed with the state. So it's not going to do that. So we have to have some alternative. And they know that, and that's why they want to shut that down. Because it is powerful. It's one of the only avenues for critical thought that we have left. I'm sorry I've taken up too much of your time ranting about this, but it's amazing to watch this happen because they are going to try and shut it down. I mean, that is ultimately the goal. What you're seeing happen right now is precisely why in 1786 Thomas Jefferson wrote, "Our liberty depends on the freedom of the press, and that cannot be limited without being lost."